Good evening and welcome to the Age of Bones podcast. It's good to see you again. It's Wednesday, the 8th of September. It's a new month. We're going to tell you all about the new stuff we've got coming up for review a little bit later. But first of all, joining me on this edition is Ed Selley.
Let the meat static.
And Steve Withers.
Of all the souls I've encountered on my journeys, his was the most human.
Welcome back. We're here for the next hour. And hopefully we won't get any Steve's Shatner-esque acting skills.
I'll do a quick bit of Rocket Man later, though, if you're really lucky. Okay.
Right, so we got lots coming up tonight. Thank you for joining us. It is the hardware edition. We're going to talk a lot about TVs, projectors, your home cinema. If you're still following us and building your home cinema, your dedicated room, we're going to talk about projectors tonight. Hot topic. Because JVC have announced some new laser projectors, which we're going to talk about a little bit later on. And Steve's going to get very, very excited about. So that's coming up. We've got some TV launches from Philips and TCL to talk about. The TCL was announced today. It's the TVs for next year, but they are announcing them now. We've also got some other bits and pieces. We're going to go through what we've got coming up for review. We're also going to talk about software. Absolutely brilliant album of the week this week. It's been a high rotation here. Ed will tell you all about that. And Steve's going to talk about some 4K discs of the week. And we'll wrap up with what we've been watching on the telly box and tell you what you should watch and what you should avoid and what's middle of the road and not really sure if we're enjoying it or not, but we're watching it anyway. That's all coming up on tonight's podcast. But first of all, what have you been up to, Ed?
I've been buying tyres. I bought a pair of tyres for the car, which was not inconsequentially expensive. And then 388 miles later, I did say 588 on Twitter, but then I recalculated it. 388 miles later, I had to avoid an oncoming motorist who was in turn trying to overtake a cyclist where they shouldn't. I put the car into a very deep pothole and tore the side of one of the very brand new tyres, and had to buy another one. So I bought 3 tyres in the last since the last podcast, which I don't recommend. They're quite expensive. Then I realized I couldn't get into my garden anymore because there's a fig tree which had grown to quite tremendous proportions. So I cut large bits of the fig tree off. Now, if you're watching the podcast, either live or otherwise, I have come out in some sort of weird selection of welts where I came into contact with
it's obviously been a flesh-eating plant and it's going to eat you alive.
So it's had its revenge. That's been unpleasant. Otherwise, I've been working, listening to music, and that's pretty much it.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, once you bought that many tyres, there's not much scope to do much else, really. So,
how much are the tyres for your car?
At mates rates, they are 120 odd pounds.
Oh, that's nothing. That's absolutely nothing. Try buying them for.
Yeah, you get more than 388 miles out of them, don't you? I mean, to be fair, you'll probably get more than 7,900 miles out of a set, even when you don't do potholes, which is what I got out of my first set.
Yeah, I think I got about 18,000 out of the last set, but then I should do because they're blinking expensive. They're nearly £300 a tyre, so they should be. There
you go. I mean, I live in Milton Keynes. I drive like my hair is on fire, and then I have potholes. So okay, it's been good.
Good stuff. We'll talk about music and work and stuff a little bit later. And just remember, Ed, you might want to put it up on your screen again to face forwards when you're talking with that microphone.
No, absolutely.
It's not attached to your head.
Focus.
How come you haven't got a background, Ed?
He has his wall.
It's a plain wall.
No,
Steve.
but I mean, normally you have an appropriately
topical
background.
I am eyeing up yet another fine item from the Adidas catalogue at the moment. But
let it go, man.
No, I'm looking at my winter trainers now. So they're leather uppers.
What did they do? Winter trainers, did they?
No, the ones with leather uppers rather than suede, so they do better when they get wet.
Okay.
That's my excuse, and I'm sticking to it. So we'll see how that goes.
Okay. Well, before we lose all our listeners because we're talking rubbish and not talking AV, Steve, what have you been up to?
I'll keep this short and sweet because obviously a lot less than Ed. I'll tell you what, we'll talk about this again, I guess, towards the end, but I've ended up watching quite a few 9/11 documentaries.
Yeah.
And I cannot believe it's 20 years.
No.
Yeah, I know.
And I suspect, and I certainly, God, I hope, we'll never see anything like that again.
Yeah.
I mean, the idea of an event the entire world was watching at the same time.
Yeah, we are going to come back to that. Obviously, I've been watching some of them as well, so we'll give you recommendations on what is worth your time watching there, because there are some new documentaries, obviously, for this anniversary. So, and some of them have been very, very good. Right. I haven't been doing much this week, actually. I'm off on holiday next week, but it's a movies podcast next week, so you're not going to miss me next week. But I'm off to the Isle of Arran for a week's holiday.
Movies podcast with special guest me.
I really do feel for them. I really do feel for them. They don't know what's coming, and it'll be interesting.
I'm pretty sure they do, because they've been on this podcast with me enough times.
Yeah, but then they don't have me reining you in. That's the problem.
That's very good. We'll see what Tom's made of.
Right. So before we go and talk about hardware, what can we win, Ed?
Right, okay, a smaller number of prizes, but my word, there's some bangers here. You can still win the Valencia Theatre Luxury Seating Recliner. That's worth 1,400 quid, and it looks tremendously cosseting if you look at the pictures of it. So that is a hell of a prize. We also have a number of 4K and Blu-ray competitions, including the £75 May Grey, the complete series on Blu-ray. We're still plugging that's a £75 box set. The Father, Mortal Kombat, A Quiet Place Part 2, 4K, Sound of Violence, Mandy Limited Edition, The Conjuring, Devil Made Me Do It, Criterion's September titles on Blu-ray, and The Hitman's Wife Bodyguard in 4K. Head over to avforums.com/competitions to enter. All competitions are open to eligible AV Forums members resident in the UK, basically except Phil, and it does include the Isle of Man. We have some previous winners as well. Maya Russell won Life in Colour with David Attenborough on Blu-ray. PJ Foster won The Story of Film, An Odyssey on Blu-ray. Academic Barzo won Criterion's July titles on Blu-ray. So well done to you all, and stay tuned for our podcast exclusive competition to win a copy of Dark Star on Blu-ray. So all to play for.
Okay, so well done to our competition winners. If you haven't won, get yourself in there. Again, if you're a patron as well, there are usually things in there which give you some good odds as well. So go check out the competitions page, sign up as a patron, and well done to those who have won. And of course, stay with us till the end of the podcast for an incredibly easy question. So you could be in a chance to win Dark Star on Blu-ray. But next, it's hardware.
If you'd like to support the AV Forums podcast on a regular basis, then why not become a patron? Head over to patreon.com/AV Forums to sign up. You can also make a one-off donation through the Super Chat or via streamlabs.com/AV Forums. All donations help us to improve the website and the podcasts. Thank you to all our supporters.
Right, so we're back with some hardware, and rather than doing reviews this week, because it is the beginning of a new month, and we've got lots of new reviews coming up, which we will cover over the next few weeks. We're going to cover some news, because there have been some big news conferences the last couple of weeks while we've been away on the podcast. So the first one that we're going to come up with is Philips. It should be IFA time of the year in Berlin. I am not sure if IFA actually happened, Steve. I have no idea. It's been very, very low key.
If it did, they didn't tell me.
Yeah, it's been very, very low key yet again this year. So, which is a shame, because I was looking through my memories on Facebook, and it seems I've been to Berlin since 2007, constantly, almost every year. I think there was maybe 2 or 3 years where I didn't make it and you went in my place. But other than that, it's been a constant in my calendar, and it's a bit strange that it's not been around for the last 2 years. I think I'm actually missing it, which there's obviously something wrong with me there, because it's a huge show, a massive showground, and it takes forever to get around and see everybody. It's worse than CES, I would say, in terms of getting around and the footfall and all the rest of it. But it hasn't happened. So manufacturers have been doing their own thing. So like I say, Philips, usually big at IFA, they usually have a couple of TVs that they launch. They use IFA as a big launch vehicle, not just for the TVs, but also for the health products and gadgets. And obviously, we've got the new Fidelio stuff coming along as well. But we're going to concentrate on the OLED Plus TVs. So OLED Plus is their premium OLED TVs, the ones with the latest LG display panels in them. I've actually got a Philips OLED in for the minute, but it's the OLED 806, and it's a 48-inch. It's sitting behind me, behind my big head there. up against a 65-inch TV, it just shows you the difference in screen sizes because that's a 65-inch Panasonic sitting next to it. I've been playing around with that, so they have improved year on year. Philips have got a lot of their mojo back when it comes to TVs. I think they are seriously underrated, in my opinion. Every Philips TV I've had it in for review over the last 3 or 4 years had been a very, very strong contender when up against the likes of LG and Panasonic and Sony and so on, especially with what they do with the LG display panels. And of course, its picture processing is their thing, the P5 engine, which we've covered in some details in podcasts in the past. It's a very, very powerful tool. Not so much for the enthusiast. If you're like myself and Stephen, you like accuracy and so on, the Philips sets will do accuracy. They will do good motion. There is the new motion control on there as well. I noticed it was on the 806. Adds a little bit of interpolation in there into the pull down, but it's not too distracting. So I think most users would like that. So in terms of processing, Philips have all been strong. So they've announced 2 models, the OLED 936 to replace...
You missed the plus, Phil.
Sorry, the OLED Plus 936 to replace the OLED Plus 935 from last year. Bowers Milk and soundbar on that one, obviously. And the 935 is a cracking TV. I have... the 936 is going to be just as good. It's got new features on there, which we'll go through in a second. They're also replacing the flagship with the 806, so the OLED Plus, 986. 986, which is going to be the flagship, which you looked at the last flagship, Steve. So basically, it's the same panel as the 936. It just has a different stand and it has a bigger Bowers and Wilkins.
The same panel, the same features, but it's got a massive Bowers and Wilkins, well, effectively a soundbar. And if it's anything like the one I reviewed, it will sound pretty good. Easily the best sounding TV I've ever experienced. Yeah,
absolutely. I've had a number of times, and it is, and it should be, because it is a proper Bowers and Wilkins speaker. It's decoupled from the screen. It's on a solid stand. It has the tweeter.
Separate tweeter.
Yeah. So it has everything that you would expect from Bowers and Wilkins on there, and it does sound incredibly good. So you've got the dual P5 processor, which was introduced last year on the 935. It's now on both of these sets, as well as HDMI 2.1 support. A little bit vague on the 2.1 support, but I am guessing that it's a MediaTek 2.1 chipset that Panasonic are using and Sony are using as well. So I think we know what we're going to get from that. The 936 comes in 48, 55, and 65-inch screen sizes, and the 986 is just going to be available as a 65-inch TV, which I think the last flagship was only available as a 65 as well, Steve, if I remember correctly.
I think when you've got a speaker set that large, it's going to look very weird. Above a smaller screen. So I think, if nothing else, I think there's an element of stylistic consistency to what they're doing.
There's some new stuff in there as well. Calman is now supported fully, so you've got the auto cal in there for support with that. There's obviously artificial intelligence EQ.
Cool.
Lots of these modes now appearing on TVs, cognitive processors and all that kind of thing on. Everybody's got their own name for it, but basically the processing is really, really good on the Philips. I don't think you'll go wrong. Anti-screen burn measures in there. So again, like the LGs and the Sonys, it does, it finds out where the logos are on the screen and it dims that part of the screen so you don't get any image retention through doing stuff like that. So they look very, very strong TVs. I'm not going to go into it in too much detail because I haven't seen them yet. I would think that the 936 is going to be on a par with the 935 with just the new features added on there. Low latency for gaming as well on there, which is something that I'm glad Philips have taken seriously, because in the past few years, they've tended to go for movie and TV and neglect the gaming side of things. But I think with 2.1 VRR, ALLM and so on, being the must-have tick boxes for 120 at 4K, being things that people are now looking for in their TVs. Philips have taken notice and they've added that in for these models as well.
Packed and honest, and they seem to have just about everything I can think of. Dolby Vision IQ, HDR10 Plus. Was it Active? Is that what they call it?
Adaptive.
Nothing in the OLED program, all the way from the start. I mean, watching this from a more outside looking in perspective than you guys, it just nothing they've done since they've started doing OLED panels has felt half-hearted at any stage. It's never been a me too thing. They've been determined to both go their own way,
absolutely,
and produce something which is recognizably a little bit different from what the competition's doing.
Yeah, and I totally agree with Ed. I think they are seriously underrated, and I think people just need to take them a little bit more seriously when they're looking for the next TV. Philips used to be a good name, and for some reason that name didn't.
They had some difficulties, didn't they? But I'd say that they're delivering great TVs. They've obviously got their unique features like four-sided ambilight on these models, which is a lot of people love. One thing that did catch my attention, Phil, I don't know what you think about this, but it's they referred to the panels as OLED Evo panel.
Yes, I think there's been a little bit. Of,
I wonder if LG's lawyers have been on the phone.
There has been, from what I understand, Steve. I don't have this directly. I'm obviously quoting this from a third party. I may get it wrong, and apologies if I do. But I think Evo is a trademark of LG Electronics, not LG Display. So I think there's been a little bit of why using that name, because it is a trademark.
Exciting news to Mitsubishi, obviously.
There's a cease and desist order in the post.
Well, I don't know if that's the case or not, but this is just what I've heard through different various sources, and I haven't had anything confirmed. But yes, it's an interesting, probably slip of the tongue, I think, they're calling it Evo. But it is the latest LG display.
Slip of the press release.
Slip of the press release. It is the latest LG display panel that's been used.
Released a press release without a glaring error that has at least one lawyer involved.
I mean, they're claiming 20% increase in peak brightness, which would be similar to the G1. So
yeah. I'm expecting the performance to be the same as the G1. It's the same panel that's in there, basically. I think the only screen that won't probably come up to that is perhaps the 48-inch, because as far as I know, the Evo version of the panel is only the 55-65, because Panasonic are the same, only the 55 and 65, 1500 and 2000.
It does say in the press release, with the exception of the 48-inch 926, all models will feature, exactly the same.
Yeah. So again, the 48-inch in those ranges won't have the same panels, and it's the same with Panasonic this year as well. They don't have them. But yeah, it looks like a strong lineup. I'm looking forward to getting them in for the TV in for review. I've got the 806 in at the moment, and it's a strong TV. I've got it set up next to the Panasonic, and it hasn't missed a beat so far. I haven't put it through too many paces just yet, because I've been working on videos this week, which is now a nightmare with this computer that I'm using at the minute. It takes twice as long as normal. So I've been beavering away at that before I go away on holiday. But yeah, the 806 looks strong. Looking forward to seeing the 936. I think it's a good TV if it's anything like the 935. And again, it wasn't too expensive, the 935. I was going to
say, it all depends on pricing, doesn't
it? Yeah. I expect them to be same price as LG, maybe a little bit lower. And filmmaker mode in there as well, which is great. That's everybody now doing filmmaker mode, apart from Sony. The Sony, and your custom mode, because I measured it on your, it's not good. So you need filmmaker mode on your TV, Sony. So anyway, that looks good from Philips. We look forward to seeing those TVs, and they've always been award winners because they've always been strong. And like I say, underrated as far as I'm concerned. More people should look at them. Other news this week: TCL. They're going to launch 2 new 8K mini LED TVs for 2022. But they had their launch event today. I had a quick look at the online.
Is it going to be launched in the UK?
Yes, it's coming to the UK next year. And so we are getting them, the X925 and X925 Pro are the models that they spoke about in the press, the online press launch today. And then the press release came through, and it did confirm on the press release that we are getting them in the UK. So it'll be interesting to see those. Obviously, TCL were driving force behind mini LED or mini LED, as some companies call it. So it'll be interesting to see those TVs and test them, because obviously Samsung have gotten behind the technology now with their TVs that I've been looking at as well. The Neo QLED, which I've got behind me here, it's the same or similar technology. So it'll be interesting to see TCL, because one thing that Samsung have got going for them, Steve, is the fact that they are local dimming algorithms are some of the best on the market because they've had to put the R&D in. They don't have, at the minute, OLED TVs, so they've had to really develop the technology with the LCD panels. And their dimming algorithms are superb, very, very good. They've fine-tuned them year on year with feedback from reviewers, with feedback from enthusiasts and so on, and they've gotten better and better. So it'll be interesting to see how TCL get on with that. Obviously, quantum dot technology on there as well, Dolby Atmos via the Onkyo sound system. So it looks like a really well-spec'd,
whatever the hell that means.
9, basically.
Yeah, I know. I'm kidding. HDR10 Plus, though, so it does both versions of metadata.
Yeah, and it does Dolby Vision IQ as well. So it's Dolby Vision IQ, Dolby Vision, HDR10 Plus, HDR10 Plus Adaptive. I think it's basically doing everything, and
Dolby
it's
Atmos.
an 8K panel as well, 100 hertz panel. So yeah, I'll be interested to see what they do with that. In terms of gaming, I'm just having a quick scan just to double check before yes, it is HDMI 2.1. Again, it's probably a MediaTek chip, VRR, ALLM, or low latency mode, 4K 120 EARC. It's also got a master game mode on there. I did the 815 last year, which was their Edgelit TV, and it was a cracking TV for the money. The screen real estate that you were getting, as well as the Onkyo soundbar, it again was a really strong living room TV. I wouldn't say it was an enthusiast TV, but a strong contender for the living room. If all you want is a TV to watch, sports, normal TV programming, the odd film, and so on. It was a strong contender, and it was a 65-inch for under, I think, £700 at the time. No pricing on the X925 or the X925 Pro. The Pro has a slightly different design. It has a soundbar that it has a movable front that's motorized, so it can move in and out of the speaker. A large bass woofer on the rear stand, nicely designed. It's got a monolith sort of lean back design to it as well. So again, be interesting to see how those perform. I expect to get them through for review, but again, that's going to be next year. 2022 for
My
those.
only comment would be that, as with most things in life, it's not how many zones you've got, it's what you do with them that counts.
Which is why I mentioned the dimming algorithm right at the start. Yeah, absolutely. It will be interesting to see what they do with the dimming algorithm and how well that performs. Because, mini LED, it's promising technology, but you really need the processing behind it to get it to work. So that's the TVs out of the way that have been announced. Obviously, the news stories are on the homepage. So if you want to get into them in a little bit more detail and discuss them as well on the forums, there are discussion threads with that, with those news stories, and head over at the front page. Both of them are still there in the second layer of the homepage. You'll find the news stories there. Go have a read, get involved with the conversations and so on. You also notice there's a news story there for JVC. They've announced new projectors, and I'm going to hand over to Steve because I think Steve's rather excited about the prospects of these projectors. I'm a little bit more laid back these days, but Steve's definitely
I like a projector, that film.
Yeah.
I like a projector, and JVC obviously haven't had a new lineup for 3 years. So which is a bad thing.
Yeah, I was just going to say that's not a bad thing at all. It's been nice having.
They had the same models for 3 years, and they updated the firmware each year and added really useful, really effective new features, like basically, dynamic tone mapping, things like that. So I think everyone was really pleased with that, but you knew at some point they were going to launch something new. And I guess given how good the N5, N7, and NX9 were, it's going to be something pretty special to warrant a new range. But even I had plenty of rumors before the announcement, but I was actually quite surprised at what they're putting in these projectors. Now, granted, obviously this is all on paper. They look amazing. We need to see them in action. But I think if you go through what these new projectors have got on them, it really is. They really have. They've laid the gauntlet down to Sony, because they've clearly priced them to compete with the Sony projectors, but they've got way more features, and in my opinion will probably perform better. Certainly the current lineup, the N5, N7, and NX9, perform better than the Sony.
Yeah. Before we go any further, so they've all got laser light. They don't use bulb anymore, which is a big positive. My only concern, Steve, is that the Blue Essence laser that they use is derived from what was in the Z1. I wasn't a big fan of the Z1 in terms of it lost a lot of the JVC appeal in terms of black levels and dynamic range.
That's the one big worry. Is because the Z1 was an impressive projector in many ways, but the one thing it didn't do well was black levels. Now, it was a very bright projector. You know, it was their first.
It was a large venue projector. Really,
size of the small. It was the size of a small family car. I mean, it wasn't exactly. Yeah, it was designed for large venues. It was designed to be very bright, and clearly these projectors. So we're talking about the NZ7, NZ8, and NZ9. So the N5 will continue. That will continue to be available, $6.5 grand.
Which I've got in the cinema room, and I think as a native 4K projector, it doesn't have the filter and the light path for the wide color gamut, but it's a cracking machine. It really is. For the money, it's brilliant.
So $6.5 grand. That's going to be their entry point bulb, a lamp projector, and then after that, you're talking laser, which means that they have stopped production on the N7 and the NX9. Now the N7, I think it's going to become extremely sought after. I mean, it has been since it was launched, because they haven't been able to keep up with demand, frankly, in terms of manufacturing. Obviously, there's been other issues over the last couple of years causing bottlenecks. But the NZ7, which is the entry-level laser projector, which will be about 10 grand. We actually haven't had the UK prices announced yet, I don't think. But based on the European and US prices, we're looking at 10 grand. Or just a shade under 10 grand. That's the entry point for the laser projectors, the NZ7, but that does not have a DCI P3 filter. If you want that, you're going to have to go for the NZ8, which is 15 grand. And that means, that's a big jump from the N7, which is 8.5 to 15, if you want a DCI P3. So I think, the N7 might become quite sought after people who want the wider color gamut, but don't want to shell out 15 grand. So we've got the NZ7, NZ8, NZ9. NZ7 just 10 grand, NZ8 15 grand roughly, and NZ9 25 grand. They all use the Bluescence laser. They all support 8K. They have full 48 gigabits per second HDMI 2.1 input, so they do 4K, 8K 60 and 4K 120. They'll support HDR10 and HDR10 Plus, which makes them only the second projectors that I know of, apart from the Samsung Premier that I reviewed not so long ago, the ultra short throw laser projector, which does do HDR10 Plus as well. These are some of the first projectors to actually support that feature. Hopefully that means that theoretically they could also, if Dolby were up for it, add Dolby Vision. I do believe that Dolby's yet to certify any consumer projector, so don't blame JVC just because it hasn't got Dolby Vision. It might just be because Dolby don't want to do it, but they've got 4K 120, 8K at 60p. So the as I said, the NZ8 and the NZ9 have the color filter, so they get the full 100% DCI P3. I believe the NZ7 will do about 93% of DCI P3. Obviously, they've got long life, 20,000 hours, so you can watch a film a day for the next 20 years. The brightness is 3,000 lumens for the NZ9, 2,500 for the NZ8, and 2,200 for the NZ7. They're claiming 40,000 to 1 for the, this is the interesting bit, because obviously we're talking about contrast ratios on the Z1 not being very good. JVC are claiming 40,000 to 1 on the NZ7, which will be comparable to the N5, 80,000 to 1 on the NZ8, which will be comparable to the N7, and 100,000 on the NZ9, which will be comparable to the NX9. The NX9 will have the same 100mm lens as found on the NX9, and then the other two projectors will have the same 65mm lens that was on the N7 and N5. All glass. They've on the NZ8 and 9, they have also changed the actual light path in order to reduce reflections within the lens. I suspect that might be to address the bright corners that you could see on the N series.
Yeah.
That's my guess. Have I missed anything, Phil? Oh, yes, an E-shift. So the NZ7 has the same E-shift that was on the NX9. That just shifts the image across diagonally. So it doesn't give you a full 8K image, although it can accept an 8K signal. And the NZ8 and NZ9 will have this E-shift X, which goes in 4 different directions and actually can show a full 8K image from an 8K source. think that's it, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't think you missed anything. I mean, the only thing I've been pushing for it for years, and I hope they are going to do it with, now that we're moving over to a laser engine, is the calibration side of things. It's always been, if you wanted to use their built-in calibration, you needed a spider optical.
You still
meter.
do, I believe.
And it's just not up to the job if you want accuracy. And of course, if you're talking about laser technology, you're talking about finer wavelengths of light. I hope that they're going to open that up and make it easier to use professional, expensive meters that can actually, calibrate them correctly, rather than relying on the spider. That's only been the one thing that's annoyed me over the years, is they haven't opened that up to use with better quality meters.
Which one of these do you have, Steve?
I got the
old
N7.
ones. And you've got an N7, the one that you've just been bigging up for huge resale.
The one, by strange coincidence, I've been picking up. I mean, seriously though, I do think they are going to become quite sought after, because
they are. Yeah.
Okay. Serious point. Obviously, you put a degree of your own money into that. I mean, obviously you aren't going to do anything until you've seen how the damn things perform. That's a given. But I mean, does the skipping a generation thing apply to you in this instance? Is there a threshold that these things have to meet before you'd even go anywhere near considering replacing the N7?
They have to be at least as good, and by that I mean at least as good in terms of lat levels and not noisy. The Z1, sorry, wasn't particularly quiet either, although as Phil said, it was really designed for large venues. So as long as they aren't any noisier, as long as they have similar contrast performance, then otherwise, these, I mean, obviously the advantages of a laser light source is 20,000 hour lifespan, so you don't have to worry about the bulb dimming and then replacing it after say 2,000 or 3,000 hours. You've got greater consistency. The 8K bit isn't particularly interesting. I mean, you can turn the E shift off anyway if you don't want to use it. Again, I could hear the E shifts on the older 4K models, the ones before the N series, which it was quite, for my ears, and obviously everyone's different, but I got very acute hearing, and I could pick out that little
I could as well. I mean,
really clearly. So that's one thing I have not missed on the N7, because obviously it's native 4K, doesn't need that. So I'm not sure that's something I'd want. The 4K 120 input, I mean, I'm not going to be gaming on a projector, although I might do, because, once you've got a laser, you're not worried about the bulb life, it becomes less of an issue. It certainly looks interesting. And HDR10 Plus edition would be interesting too. Although I have to say the dynamic the dynamic tone mapping is very good on the N7. I mean, I can't fault the N7. I think it's an amazing projector. I absolutely love it. So you're right, Ed. I'm tempted, but it would very much depend on what it actually does in reality. Pricing.
Yeah.
Well, no, obviously pricing is, let's face it.
Although I say it ain't cheap, it's cheaper than the Sonys. They've priced them below the Sonys, and they do a lot more than the Sonys do.
Yeah, and the Sonys are good projectors, but they're getting a bit long in the tooth.
They haven't really changed that projector in 5 years.
No, and to be fair, they haven't really needed to up until the last couple of years, if we're being fair. But they are starting to lag behind a little bit, and their HDR approach, I thought it was a misstep in terms of marketing. I thought
they marketed it as dynamic tone mapping, and
it wasn't.
And that's very disingenuous of them.
They should have been a bit more careful with that, I think. And I've just had a Sony in recently, still to write the review up and get published. But they are cracking projectors, but they're very toppy when it comes to price. And when you're looking at price and value compared to the N5, the N7, I'd rather go for the JVCs personally. And again, I've got nothing. They're not paying me to say that or anything like that. It's that'd be through my choice, and if it was my money, I'd be investing it in the Mustang, not a projector.
It was my money, and it was my choice to get a JVC.
Yeah,
that's why I thought it was interesting to get your take on that, Steve, because you, for want of a better phrase, have skin in the game. It was.
This is a strong lineup. I mean, it is not. I mean, even given the entry point is 10 grand, that is, by no stretch of imagination, small change. And everyone, clearly they're aiming at a specific section of the market, and then they've kept the N5 as an entry point in inverted commas at sort of 6.5 grand. And that's that makes sense because that's not a million miles away from the Sony. The cheapest Sony is what, $5,000, but you get a lot more on the N5 than you do on this 290. So in terms of features and performance, and everything about the 5 is better than the 290. So it's worth the extra grand, whatever you're going to end up paying. The new ones, like I said, they look great. The same chassis. I always had, you always knew this was coming because the chassis for the N5 and N7 and NX9, particularly the first two, was way bigger than it actually needed to be. So you figured they'll do something, but yeah, they use the same chassis. They got the same throw ratios. I think the chassis on the new ones is just a tighter, like a centimeter deeper at the back because they've got bigger exhaust ports at the back. So again, that does raise the question: how much heat does the laser generate, and how much
terrible vulnerability if there's an X-wing in your home theater as well. So you've got to be careful.
It's they are. They're impressive, I have to say. On paper, they're very impressive. They deliver the goods. In reality, then I've got a decision to make.
Okay, right. We need to move on, but thanks for that, Steve. Thanks for your input.
We're not really moving it on, are we?
Yeah, well, we're kind of moving it on.
Well, can we just before very quickly? There was obviously another press launch conference this week, and Technics is still churning things out with reckless abandon. It wasn't necessarily anything particularly radical. Sorry?
Face forward.
Sorry, there wasn't. We saw there's a new amplifier which takes some of the functionality that was present in the 700 integrated that I did on the forums comparatively recently. That brings it down to a rather more terrestrial price point. I believe something in the region of $2,000 is what we're talking about there instead of $7,000. And Phil, you can finally, you'll be delighted to hear, get the 1210 in G.
Yeah, but I'm not paying $3,500 for a turntable, Ed.
I didn't suggest for a moment that you would, but I mean, it's there, gnawing away at the back of your mind as and when they start to crop up on the used market, which is, let's face it, how we all buy Technics turntables anyway. So yes, I mean, compared to the whiz bangs of the TV releases, it's not as significant, but it's
another company, Ed, that's got the mojo back. The Technics brand was run into the ground by Panasonic, unfortunately, in the late 90s. It became known as a cheap brand. It sold in richer sounds for 90 quid for a CD player and so on, and it got a bad rep in the end, which was a bit of a shame. But they've been away. They've come back with a new ethos. The quality is there.
And you can't argue that it's in any way derivative. They are very much ploughing their own furrow, for want of a better phrase, in terms of what they're doing. So yes, they're active as well. I have looked at some of the Technics turntables in the past. The plan was actually originally to look at the affordable one as and when it comes out. But if there's a groundswell of opinion from people listening, watching, etc., to this, that you want me to have a crack on a G series one, I mean, I'll suffer for my art, and
that's real suffering there.
I know the things I do for you guys. So just there will be more Technics reviews in the pipeline. I'm always open to feedback as to which ones those should be.
Okay, right. We were going to, eloquently go from laser projectors into talking about projectors in the cinema room.
To briefly talk about something which didn't have a light.
So let's continue with our little series of building a home theater, a home cinema in your home, in a dedicated room. Now, we are talking about dedicated rooms. Obviously, we need to preface this because conversation could go off on all different kinds of tangents. We're going to keep it on the straight and narrow. This is for a dedicated room, light-controlled room, where you have complete control. It's going to be dark. It's preferably going to be black, especially the screen wall. We talked about screens last week or on the last podcast. So now we need to talk about the projector that's going to be projecting onto the screen and which kind of projector should you go for. Now, again, it's going to come down to screen size. If you're going for a massive...
And budget.
Yes, but if you're going to go for a massive screen, you have to realize that a £7,000 JVC ain't going to fill a 300-inch screen or a 400-inch screen. If you're going for massive American-style full walls screens, you're going to need a large venue projector for that kind of thing. You're going to need something that's going to pump out a lot of lumens to basically keep that screen bright. So we're not going to go there because I think that's a bit specialist.
We're going to assume for the purposes of this conversation that you're going for a sensible size screen.
Exactly. So we're talking about 100 to 150 inch screen, whatever ratio you want. 235 is popular at the minute. Acoustically transparent and so on. We discussed them last week. So that's the type of screen we're going for. We're looking at projectors. And I guess if you want high end, you want really good performance, there are two games in town, basically. That's Sony and JVC when it comes to native 4K, with native 4K chips. And we've just been through why Steve likes JVC. I've had the Sonys in here. I've had all the Sonys. I'm expecting the flagship to turn up any time soon after my holiday as well. So we've done the Sonys, we've done the JVCs. They are very, very close in terms of performance. The only things that really, I would say, Steve, separate them at the moment is dynamic tone mapping on the JVC
one feature
for
that
HDR.
Definitely, I think, is a plus point for the JVCs. The area where the Sonys are strong is processing. Mm-hmm. So if you're the kind of person that likes a very sharp, very precise, very
digital,
almost digital, but a very sharp, very precise image, then you're probably going to really like the Sony picture. If you like something that's a bit more film-like,
and that doesn't. It doesn't make it soft, because people, as soon as you say that and say, "Oh well, the JVC is soft," no, it's not. It's sharp. It's a sharp projector. It's just not. It's just not digitally sharp. It hasn't been enhanced, which the Sony does enhance. There is behind the scenes like processing. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that.
If you do, Philly boots. Personally, I would rather a more film-like image, and the JVCs are absolutely the most film-like projectors I've ever experienced, and that's at any price point, frankly. So that's one thing to consider. Another thing to consider is we were just talking about lasers. So obviously, the benefits of laser are longer lifespans and more consistent over their life, and to a certain extent also wider color gamut. So that does depend on what kind of lasers they're using. So if it's an RGB laser, they could probably reach 2020. But I mean, in the case of certainly the Sonys and the JVCs, they do not. They can hit DCI-P3, but that's about the limit of it. So that's one thing to consider. Obviously, if you're going to go for a scope screen, then you really want a projector with a lens memory, because that way you can adjust the image depending on the aspect ratio.
Yeah, now, a lot of people are going to say, yes, Steve, but you're going to lose brightness by zooming, and you're enlarging the pixels and so on. I'm going to talk from my experience here. I have use of an anamorphic lens. It's not an expensive one, but I can use one and put them when I'm testing a projector against the lens memory. I don't see a massive difference. I don't see a difference that would make me spend another $7,000 on a piece of glass and a motor to move it in and out of the light path in comparison to the zoom control. And if you've got a commercial theatre these days, or a commercial cinema,
they zoom and shift in the cinema.
They zoom shift in the cinema now. All the new digital projectors do that.
Modern projectors, these projectors, they're bright enough, the resolution's high enough, you can zoom and shift. If you put an anamorphic lens in there, A, it's expensive, B, you're adding something in the light path, which means it has to be high quality glass. C, even high quality glass will still add some aberrations you've got to deal with. Yep. You've got to scale the image, which means you're going to lose your 4K resolution straight away. And so what? For a bit more brightness, I would just zoom and shift. Yep. So if you're going to zoom and shift, you want lens memory, because then you can set one for 1.85 to 1, one for 2.35 to 1. Or, these days, if you watch Netflix, for example, a lot of their shows, some of them are 2 to 1, some are 2.1 to 1, some are 2.2 to 1. So lens memories are really useful. JVC lens memories are brilliant. They go back to the same place every time. My experience with Sony's, they ain't that good.
I've got to say they used to be good, but I think from the 590, which I reviewed recently, it was terrible. It never
went back to the same place twice.
No.
And the 290, don't forget, does not have lens memory at all.
No, it doesn't. I've just reviewed that.
That's a £5,000 projector, but doesn't have a lens memory.
Doesn't have
lens bear that in mind if you want a lens memory. What else is important? So, I mean, from the point of view of budget, if you're sub $5,000, I'd be getting the Epson TW9400, because it's not native 4K, but it's it does E-Shift, Epson's version of E-Shift. It's feature packed. It's got lens memories. It's got everything, and it's a cracking projector.
It is. I mean, what's it? $2,500? It's amazing for $2,500. It's not as bright as a DLP. The motion is not quite as good as a DLP, but it absolutely smashes it out the park with everything that matters in terms of color accuracy. 24 frames per second pulled down, it does correctly, so that there's no induced judder on there. It does wide color gamut. DLP cannot do wide color gamut at that price point. You're lucky if it can do 709 at that price point, which is HD color gamut. Ask it to do wide color gamut, it cannot do it. Yet the Epson can do it. So yeah, for $2,500, it's an absolute cracker of a projector.
If you're building a dedicated room, I would be loath to put a DLP projector in for two reasons. One, they tend to be aimed more at brighter rooms, and that's why they're bright projectors. The black levels aren't very good and not going to hold up in a dedicated room. And obviously, for some people, there's the issue of rainbows. So for that reason, the Epson would be my preferred choice at sort of the budget end of the market. Then once you get up to $5-6 grand, then you're talking about, do you want to go for 290 the Sony, or do you want to go for the N7 and the JVC?
And I guess that comes down to your screen size. If you're a 16:9, you're not going to do any zooming or whatever.
No, you're not going to, yeah.
The Sony is probably going to be perfect for you at $5.5 grand. If you want the lens memory and you want the the benefits
dynamic
of the JVC,
tone mapping and everything.
Dynamic tone mapping, so it's worth the extra $2 grand on top of that. I think.
No, extra.
Is it? It's only $1 grand, is it?
6,500 for the N5.
Is it really? Oh, right. There you go. I stand corrected.
So the man.
Bargain. So that you're right, Phil. If you're going to go with a 1.78 to 1 screen, then the Sony should do you nicely. If you can afford the extra £1,000, I would definitely be looking at the N5. And then above that, if you want, I mean, let's be honest. I mean, you've been looking at an N5. I mean, okay, it only does 93% of DCI-P3, but you've noticed the difference.
Just to bother me. I'm quite happy with the N5 I used, and
of course it also means it's brighter too because there's no filter in the lens.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, path of the lens.
I know the N7 is the sweet spot, the enthusiast's sweet spot. The N5, again, I think it's underrated. I really do think it's underrated. It's a cracking machine. I've lived with one for 18 months now, and I can't fault it. I think it's absolutely superb. It really is. If I could stretch to the NX9, I would, because that was very, very special as a JVC projector, because it had the better glass in it. It was a 100mm lens that was on that one. And the better glass, it just adds that little bit more, better glass just does that. I'm saying glass, it wasn't an all glass, but you know what I'm talking about. Was it?
It's all glass. Oh yeah, they're all the JVCs are all glass lenses, which is again something the Sonys are not.
Right.
There you go.
There you go. I was convinced that they weren't all glass.
No, JVCs are all glass. But I mean, it's one of the reasons why the NX9 was so expensive. That big piece of glass in the front was not cheap.
Yeah, and of course, obviously, they use the native DILA chipset in there as well. The Sony are more commercial.
They're both L-class, aren't they? But just the different versions of the same thing.
Different versions of the same thing. 0.69 inch off the top of my head, if I remember correctly. But yeah, and then if you're going to go higher than that, then you can spend some serious money. Now we said DLP there, Steve, without mentioning Sim 2, who have been in the high end for a long time. It's been a shame that we haven't seen Sim 2 projectors in for review for a number of years now. And in fact, I've struggled to remember who it is that actually distributes them now, because Sim 2 UK used to exist, but no longer do. So those are projectors that, again, I would suggest are more large venues, as the Barcos are. The Barco, again, DLP technology. When Steve has mentioned DLP earlier on, I'm assuming you were mentioning the $2.5 grand and under.
The cheap DLPs, not the high-end 3-chip DLP stuff.
But once you get up to there, I mean, the black levels are still not the strong point, but then when you're talking 3-chip DLP, there are other advantages there, which we could go into at length, but you know what? We're going to get an expert in to talk about that a little bit later down the line.
Yes.
And somebody who installs them for a living and can give us a little bit more. Because like I say, we don't tend to see those in for review. It's kind of difficult to stack projectors in our cinema rooms. So, and this is what we're talking about.
You have done it occasionally where we've had a couple in there, but there's a limit to what you can really do in one sitting.
Yeah, especially if they're meant to be stacked in a system and they're 30 or 5 grand a piece.
Some of these projectors ain't small.
Yeah. So hopefully we've covered everything for you in terms of projectors. If you do have questions, then obviously we've got the chat area. If you're watching live, you can ask questions in there. Or if you listen to the podcast a little bit later on, then why not send us your questions? podcast@avforums.com is the email. And of course, there is a thread attached on AV Forums. If you go to AV Forums.
There are some questions here, yes.
Well, there's been lots of questions, but one of them is projector related, so it's probably worth mentioning, which is, I mean, I did mention it when we were talking about the new JVCs, but someone's asking, Gustavo's asking about Dolby Vision on projectors. And as I said, it's down to Dolby. They have not certified any consumer projectors for Dolby Vision. There are projectors, professional ones, commercial ones that Dolby use in their Dolby cinemas, but obviously they're showing Dolby Vision stuff that's graded for projectors. As opposed to stuff that's on disc, which is, maybe using 4,000 nits. They won't be using a 4,000 nit grade for a projector. Even a laser projector is not going to hit that kind of brightness. So
no.
That's a different thing entirely. So whether Dolby are going to have to be confident that a projector is capable of delivering a consistent performance time and time again within whatever their tolerances are for Dolby Vision. So I think the question of whether there's Dolby Vision on projectors has got nothing to do with the manufacturers. It's not them being cheap or not wanting to pay for the licensing. I think it's down to Dolby and whether they want to do it at all.
Yeah.
That's my take. But I don't know for sure, but that's my take.
Yeah. So yeah, like I say, keep the questions coming in. We have a donation as well, which I want to come on to. Alistair Cox, he's donated £8.99 through the super chat. Thank you very much, Alistair, for your support. It really is appreciated. And he said, no questions attached. Just a thank you for your fine work and commitment to the forum and its members. And I hope Ed borrowed his glass from the pub like I did.
Well, now this is the thing. I'm on a podcast. I can't incriminate myself here, but this is Stubby Bob. It's that's what they're called. It's one of the designs that Camden Brewery did for their beers. And I took one look at it in the pub and I thought, that's a magnificent, it's like a little glass waste paper basket. What a wonderful glass. So I tweeted them, hello, Camden Brewery, can I buy one of these? Oh, no, they're not for sale, which put me in a bit of a quandary. So I'm pleased to say that I didn't steal this from a pub, Alex, because I got my mother to do it. So I didn't steal anything, it's fine. And then completely by accident, I've actually got the other one as well, the Tall Paul thin one for the Camden Hells, but that was by accident because New Year's Eve 2020, which seems like a lifetime ago, so 2019 into 2020, I was celebrating outside, having come out from a pub, and I stowed the pint including beer, in the inside pocket of my coat, finished the beer, and then woke up next morning and I had the other one as well. So I apologise profusely to the Camden Brewery for that, but I would have bought them if you'd sold them to me. Okay. You made my mother into a criminal recidivist.
There you go. Ed's mum's a thief. Right. Yeah. And what we got coming up for September. So let's wrap up the hardware section with what we've got coming for review, because it is the start of the month. So like I was telling you earlier on, I have the 48-inch OLED 806 from Philips. It's sitting behind me, right behind my big noggin there. Size of Sputnik, that thing. And then next to me there is a 65-inch Panasonic. We've also got a Samsung QN95A sitting in the box here. It's going to get unpacked and reviewed very soon once that Panasonic moves. What else I have? I've looked at the 50-inch AU9000 for Samsung, which is a strong edge-lit TV in the mid-range section of the market, and it was a strong contender. Review coming up for that, plus lots of videos. Been working on videos, scripting stuff, doing comparisons and scripting and so on. Lots of work behind the scenes to get those videos up and running, but yeah, they will be coming as soon as I'm back from my holidays, which will be a couple of weeks. So look out for the videos. They're coming up soon. A90J video should be over the weekend, as long as I get it finished tomorrow, which fingers crossed I'll get that finished tomorrow. And there are some comparison video shots and stuff in that if you're interested, against the Panasonic and the LGs. Steve, what you got?
I've got a brace of high-end AV processors, the Anthem AVM70 16-channel processor and the Acurus Muse 16-channel processor. So I got those two, and also a brace of soundbars. One from Hisense, which would be interesting. That's the first time I've seen a soundbar from them. and also Denon, the long-awaited 550, which has been missing in action for a while.
Right, so that's what Steve's got. So that's AV covered on Hi-Fi YZ.
The big one turns up on Friday. A pair of Bowers & Wilkins 805 D4 stand mounts. We oscillated between the 804 and the 805 in order to get something to you guys a little bit quicker. As the 805 can travel via normal human being in the back of a car, and the 804s can't, doing the 805s. If the demand is there later on in the program, we can, of course, look at a floor stander as well. That's going to come down to, you know, how many people read the review and whether it's of interest to people. It's not all super expensive at the other end of pricing, but in some regards, just as technically interesting. Got the Mark II version of the Mission QX2 loudspeaker, which I reviewed a while back, and it absolutely astonished me as £400 loudspeaker. So we've got its new and improved successor in, so we'll have to see what that can do. There is a promised product from JBL. JBL were honest enough to admit that they're having some Brexity lorry driver, general post-COVID chip shortage along with everyone else. So I really hope to get that in, because it's, if you like, it's a bit of a palate cleanser from the technological masterpieces that Bowers & Wilkins and Mission have done. It's not to say that JBL isn't a clever piece of engineering, but it's a bit more route one in its engineering than the other two loudspeakers. And there will be some other things as well. I mean, the month is but young. The other thing, we've just frozen on the video. I don't know if that's me, isn't it?
You've just frozen.
Yeah, you've just frozen, and now you've gone. Thank God for that. Was prattling on a little bit. Right. Hopefully you'll come back.
I stopped paying attention quite a while.
What
we do?
England
are playing Poland at the moment, so I'm getting distracted.
You're getting distracted with that, right? Anyway, so we've got 5 minutes of the podcast.
Let's round this up. I want to watch the second half live.
So we'll try and get Ed back. We'll go to software next.
If you enjoy the podcast on YouTube, then please like and subscribe. If you're listening to the audio version, then please leave us a rating on your podcast app. We invite you to email questions and feedback to podcast@avforums.com and join in with this episode's discussion thread in the podcasts forum at AV Forums.
Right, so we're going to do album of the week, but Ed's having some technical issues, so hopefully Stuart, who's in my head and in headphones here, will try and get Ed back and send him some messages via the different message services that we've got going. We'll try and get him back before the end of the show. So let's move on to the 4K discs of the week, or the 4K disc of the week, because it's Star Trek Day today, Steve, but we can't talk about Star Trek because the movies guys want to do Star Trek on the movies
I haven't got
podcast.
the disc yet.
You haven't got the disc
Mine
yet.
hasn't arrived yet.
So we can't spoil their podcast by doing that. But if you want to know about the Star Trek discs and what they look like and so on, Steve will have watched them by the time that podcast comes around. I know Kaz has his discs in today. First review should be hitting the website tonight, hopefully, if Kaz gets them done on time. So if you're interested in that, do that. It is Star Trek Day, but we're not going to dwell on Star Trek.
I also noticed that Simon's been beavering his way through the new second
Columbia box set.
Classics.
Yes,
so,
yes.
So on Monday that comes out.
Yeah, so there's some reviews coming up on that as
well. Lots to talk about on the movies podcast next week.
Yeah. And
in the
meantime, what is your disc of the week, Steve?
Same disc that they talked about on the movies podcast last week, I suspect. Dune. So I know they were talking on the podcast last week about boutique releases. This is yet another one. This is from Arrow. It's Dune. It's David Lynch's Dune. I know he's disowned the film since 1984, but it's a shame because it's an incredibly Lynchian film. I mean, all the stuff on Giddy Prime is just pure David Lynch. Most of it's not even in the books. So, I consider it to be a legitimate David Lynch film. I also think it's a great film. Well, it's not a great film, but I love it for reasons that I can't quite explain. Anyway, 4K release. They've done a scan of the camera negative, a nice restoration, and it looks as good as I think it's ever going to look. It was shot under quite difficult circumstances in Mexico, where there was appalling pollution. Although it cost 40 million, which back in 1984 was a lot of money. it was using quite old equipment, because apparently De Laurentiis, who was producing the film, also bought Todd AO. So they were using a lot of Todd AO lenses from the 50s and some old cameras. And obviously there's a lot of effects and stuff, and optical composites and that kind of thing in it. So it's never going to be as pristine or crystal clear as some other films from the period, particularly stuff that doesn't involve a lot of effects. But this looks as good as it's ever going to look. And it does mean that on some of my studio stuff, you can really see the detail and the craftsmanship of some of the sets. It's got so it's one of those ones where it's just the 4K disc. There's a second disc, which is a Blu-ray, but that's just full of extras. It's got all the extras that have been released to date on other releases, plus some new stuff. One thing it doesn't have is there was going to be a feature-length documentary called The Sleep Must Awaken. People making that we needed more time to finish it. It won't be done till October. Arrow didn't want to wait, I guess because they were supposed to bring this disc out last year when Dune, the Denis Villeneuve version, was meant to come out. So maybe they just couldn't wait any longer, or they just had to hit a certain date, or they had production runs, whatever it is. But they couldn't wait, so it is missing that documentary. But otherwise, it's a great set. Lots of interesting features. There's a couple of great and really interesting commentary tracks. The soundtrack is the same 5.1. So actually, there's a 5.1 mix which has been around. It was on the previous Blu-ray release, and there's also a 2-channel mix as well in lossless audio. So it's a good set. It comes in a nice package, in a slipcase with a booklet and a poster. So if you're a fan of the film, get it, obviously.
Yeah.
If you're not a fan of the film, probably not, because it's an acquired taste.
Yeah. And if you want to discuss it, it's been quite a busy discussion thread on the review as well. So the review, I think the review's now fallen off the homepage, or it might still be down the bottom section area. Lots of views of that and lots of discussion on that one as well. So if you want to take part in that, if Dune's your kind of thing, then plenty of content on the forums for you to go and look at. It's nice to see you back, Ed.
Well, I'd like to, that was caused, I'm fed up with being polite about this. That was my PlusNet router. PlusNet is staffed by some of the nicest, friendliest, and most helpful people that I've dealt with as a service provider of any description. But their hardware is made out of biscuits. And they they have no solution to the fact that one of the routers that they've installed in thousands and thousands of homes simply at random drops its 5 gigahertz network, just leaving everything high and dry. There is a very high likelihood that, having done it once, it will now do it again inside the next 18 to 20 minutes, which is
which is fine, because we've only got 5. So.
Exactly. But nevertheless, they are lovely people, but they just don't seem to have any solution to this. I've been waiting for a fiber optic install slot. And it's a shame, because as a group and a company to deal with, they're lovely, but they don't have an answer to that, and it's very frustrating.
Okay. Right, yes. So it's good to have you back. Let's talk about album of the week, because we've had Steve's 4K disc. So, like I said earlier on at the beginning of the podcast, I've had this one on high rotation. I love a bit of funk. I love a bit of James Brown, and this is a real mix of if you were into early hip hop, if you were into the real early days of Cool Herc and so on, you'll know all the hooks, you'll know all the drum breaks, you'll know all the samples of this album. So what is it, Ed?
Well, this is the origin point of this album came when Jules Buckley, who has done work with various orchestras and the BBC, at the Proms 2019, they did a short set of some of these tracks as the origin of hip hop and breaking. And it went down a storm. So they retreated back to the studio, Heritage Audio, Ghost Note, Heritage Orchestra, Ghost Note, a number of contributors, some of whom at the absolute top of their game, including Kamasi Washington. And they have recorded this set of all of these tracks, which were then sampled and formed the origin point for so many of these tracks, as Phil says. This is a magnificent album. It's on all the major streaming services, including in high res on a number of them. But he says, reaching to one side, if you are a vinyl user, this is a thing of absolute magnificence. Double LP. I cannot recommend it highly enough. It is a truly wonderful pressing. I need to make sure I'm pointing back in the right direction again. It's a wonderful pressing. It sounds fabulous. And it's just the sort of natural way to enjoy that sort of thing. There's a photo of my turntable enjoying it earlier. But nevertheless, if you're even if you're not an enormous fan of the genre, just listening to things that you go, oh Christ, I've heard that, or I've heard that, or I've heard that.
Yeah, you'll have heard the breaks, you'll have heard the samples and all the rest. And you're talking about stuff like Apache.
Yeah.
What else was in there? Get on the Good Foot.
Theme from SWAT.
Give it up, turn it loose. Dance to the drummer's beat.
More bounce to the ounce. Mexican stuff like that. It's fabulous. My brother pointed out it's not there's no new ground broken here. It's a very, very down the line recreation of those things, to the extent where they often sound like that very high resolution remasters, but it's just having them all together in one place, which is what makes them a joy. After a couple of really quite slow weeks, it was a good weeks in music, because otherwise I would have normally made a recommendation for, is it gone? He says confidently, the Churches album, Screen Violence. That's a fabulous listen as well. And if you're into moody ambient techno, Swedish Maestro's Carbon-Based Lifeforms, they released an album earlier in this fortnight set as well. So there's been some good stuff out there. It's just up to you to go listen and enjoy. So it's a good one, and there's lots more to come. Good run into the end of the year on this year. All
right, good stuff. So very quickly, we're just going to recommend what we've been watching on the TV box. Is there anything that you should be watching? Well, Steve mentioned obviously we're coming up to the anniversary of 9/11. I thought I'd seen every documentary out there over the years. There's been lots of material, lots of found footage and all sorts that have been put together to tell the stories. But one that I have been watching on National Geographic, I don't know if it's available through Disney Plus. I suggest, I would think it possibly is available through Disney Plus, but I've been watching it on Sky, and that's 9/11 One Day in America. I think it's a 6-parter. And it follows different aspects of the day from different points of view. So you have like an overview, and then it will concentrate on the South Tower, the North Tower, first responders, different services, so on, different personal stories. It's absolutely harrowing. It doesn't pull any punches. It's very graphic material in there. If you're somebody that doesn't like that kind of thing, you're probably best not to watch it. But if you want the whole raw, as it happened, this is what happened, and so on, it's one of the better compilations of all the available footage and historical footage put together. And it's astonishing viewing, and to think it was 20 years ago is scary. Doesn't feel like 20 years ago. And myself and Steve went to the site 2 years ago. Steve, or was it 3 years ago now?
It's 2019. It was 2019.
And the thing for me was going into the museum. I mean, obviously we visited the Memorial Garden and the Memorial site where the tower stood and so on. But for me, it was going into the museum, and it was rowdy, it was noisy, people talking and so on as you went in, down the escalators and so on. But the further you went in to the museum, the more personal items that you were seeing, the more the newscasts that were playing in the background and so on. It just got eerily quiet the further you went in, and very, very moving. So I've been watching that. If you want everything together in one compilation, it's brand new for 2021. This, and it just takes all the historic footage, stories, new interviews, puts it all together in a 6-part. I think it's an hour long. No, I think they're an hour and a half long per episode. And I'm on to number 2 at the minute. So, if you want to cover everything, that's my recommendation there. Steve, have you been watching any?
Yeah, there's 9/11 Turning Point. Turning Point 9/11: The War on Terror, which is on Netflix. 5-parter, very good, because it doesn't just cover 9/11, it covers the aftermath and specifically the invasion of Afghanistan, which is quite topical at the moment, obviously, and the invasion of Iraq as well. That's very good, worth seeing. There's a brilliant one on if you really want to get the inside track on what it was like that day. It's on BBC. It's on iPlayer now in UHD, and it's called 9/11 Inside the President's War Room, and there are interviews with everyone: Bush, Cheney, the lot, all the players, and it's really interesting when they're talking about like when they took off from Florida in Air Force One, and they just said like strap in, we'll just take, because they thought there might be somebody at the end of the runway with a rocket launcher. So they took off practically vertically. They just took, I mean, one person wasn't strapped in, and she said she flew against the wall and went weightless because the plane went up so fast. And then they thought they were being trapped by another plane. I mean, loads of stuff I didn't know about at all, but all this stuff that was going on behind the scenes we didn't know about, because there happened to be another plane was on the same route as them. It wasn't just going back to its airport. It wasn't obviously hijacked, but they didn't know that, and they were ready to take maneuvers. And there was the pilots. So it's another documentary also on BBC, also on iPlayer, about 9/11, surviving 9/11, which is interviews of a number of people who survived it. And their specific stories, which is very interesting. Again, one of them was an interview with one of the pilots who was sent to intercept United 93, and they had no weapons on the plane, so they actually flew out there with the intention of ramming it, which is quite brave. Yeah, that's it. Surviving 9/11. So those two are brilliant, and so is Turning Point. So all are worth watching. All are very harrowing, but they do give you interesting and different perspectives on the same.
Yeah. And before we move on, I've been watching a BBC drama for the first time in a long time. Vigil, yeah.
Isn't it weird? It's line of duty in a submarine.
Yeah, it's like it's 3 episodes in, and I'm still not sure if I'm enjoying it or not. There's some real inconsistencies with how police investigate and all the rest of it, and what happens. If you're procedural in any way like I am, it kind of grates a little bit.
Don't worry. My friend who's good at submarines is equally frustrated.
Well, I was just going to say, plus,
I heard it's bollocks on all counts.
How big is this submarine? I mean, they got ceiling space that's just unbelievable. It's a huge set and normal doors and all the rest of it. It's like, but yeah, it's. In terms of the drama, in terms of the acting and so on, I can't really fault it at the moment, but I'm not sure if I'm enjoying it or not. It's we'll have to see. But anyway, it's worth tuning in. It's only 3 episodes. It's in 4K on iPlayer as well, if you want to catch up with that. So that's me done. Ed, what you got?
Mortar and Whitehouse gone fishing for another series.
I love that. Yeah,
I haven't seen this one yet. As I say, it's in the contrast to 9/11 documentaries and Submarine Line of Duty.
Light relief.
It is light relief, but it's the most glorious light relief because it delivers at every level. It's beautiful to look at, it's cathartic, and it's 2 wonderful human beings. So no, that's there. And one that I have on recommendation, because I haven't got around to watching it yet, that BBC series on the early Premier League years kicked off on Monday.
Oh yeah, I want you to watch that.
That's supposed to be extremely good, and I do intend to start watching that. So that is also on the to-do list. So that would be is that iPlayer, Ed? It should be, yes.
Right. Okay.
But a number of people have said that's very good.
Yeah. Okay. I'll check that one out.
If you are a bit 9/11 out, and that's no attempt to minimalise the fact that it's 20 blooming years and all the rest of it, but nevertheless, if you're simply looking for something a little less involved, I would suggest those 2 programs as being a fine place to start. And if you're really looking to have your brain trouble out of your ears, Netflix randomly dropped up 2 series of BattleBots, which is sort of robot wars but American.
So those robots have actually got guns on them, then, have they?
Well, I tell you what. What's really weird is there's such a completely, I don't think this is anything they're set out to do, but it's the nature of, because it's inanimate object fighting, there's a very strong Game of Thrones aesthetic to how these things fight, because basically they fight until they both die. So it's got ludicrously over the top American commentary. It's pretty much everything you could ask for in inanimate objects battering the crap out of each other. So that's there as well.
Thanks very much, Ed. Have we missed anything, Steve? Or is
I've got one show that I've started watching on Disney Plus. It drops on every Wednesday. So it's the 3rd part dropped today. It's called Only Murders in the Building. It's written by and starring Steve Martin, with Martin Short and Selena Gomez. And it's nice. It's just about a bunch of true crime podcast fans who start investigating a murder in their building in New York. And it's like Ted Lasso, it's just a couple of pair of slippers you put on at the end of the week.
Right. To decompress. It sounds like a Frost and Peg type thing, that.
It's a bit like that. I mean, obviously Steve Martin and Martin Short have, Steve Martin and Martin Short have worked together numerous times, so they have good chemistry together. Both are doing their full-on shtick. And Selena Gomez, I find strangely compelling. So
That's an interesting euphemism.
No, I say that because she's always got a really deadpan delivery, but it really works. It's like, either she's the world's worst actress or possibly one of the best.
Well, that's the Kristen Stewart conundrum, isn't it?
Yeah, quite. But it's fun. It's funny, and I'm enjoying it. And like I say, it takes your mind off the hideousness of the world we live in.
Yes. Yeah. So.
Okay. Well, that wraps it up for this week. We only need to do the podcast competition that you've all been waiting desperately for to win a copy of Dark Star. So Ed, why don't you tell us what's what with that?
Right, listen carefully, people, because this question is extremely difficult. To win a copy of Dark Star on Blu-ray, please use the following questions to select the correct answer from the competition page. Who directed Dark Star? And I would like to point out that if I know the answer to a film question, we are at the CBeebies level of question difficulty. There.
Also, the title of the film.
Yes,
it is actually. Yeah.
So Kaz has obviously grown tired of subverting expectations.
By asking a genuine question.
Yeah, we need to set up a phone line and charge people £7.50 to
that's where the money is.
Whenever we need to do one of those giant gadget show style podcast bundles, but just stuff I found in my house.
Just random shit we want to get rid of. Right, on that bombshell, that's it for this week. Bye. Thanks to Ed Selley.
Oh God, hang on.
You can do the one. I'm not going to do it.
No. I don't believe in the no-win scenario.
And Steve Weathers.
I only use it for medicinal purposes.
Oh, we were expecting the other one.
Subverting expectations.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if you've enjoyed the podcast tonight, then please do give us a like. It helps the podcast get found. It fights against the YouTube algorithm. So hit the like button, please, people, if you don't mind. That is appreciated if you're watching on YouTube. You can also subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. You'll be told every time we upload new videos. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook, social media side of things. You can bookmark avforums.com and come along and read our reviews and watch our videos and read the news as well. And of course, if you want to give us a 5-star or a 10-star rating, depending on the podcast provider you use to listen to us, then please do leave us a rating. It is appreciated. We enjoy having you along for us and listening in. So thanks again for listening this week. I'm Phil Hinton. We'll catch you in 2 weeks' time for the next Hardware Podcast.